Alice's Adventures in Wonderland is a novel by Lewis Carroll, written in 1865. He has been a writer, a mathematician, a photographer, a logic, and a British Anglican priest from the Victorian Age. During this time, there was a great development of middle-class children's literature. Kids had to be educated and prepared for their entry into society as adults, so many children's books had to have an educational role. In fact, most of the stories dealt with adventures, pilgrimages, or situations from which children could draw a lesson. Alice in Wonderland was detached from all of this. Alice's story, in fact, doesn't represent the process of growth. Rather, the world in which Alice ends up when she falls into the rabbit hole represents the reversal of the Victorian world from which the girl comes from. It's a world in which all scientific and natural laws are meaningless. Time and space are relative. The political world is also turned upside down. Wonderland is ruled by a queen who behaves irrationally, contrary to Queen Victoria, who was so loved by her subjects. The novel can have different levels of interpretation. It can be read simply as a children's story, thanks to the presence of strange and bizarre characters and fantastic situations, or as one of the most important novels of nonsense literature, in which the language and linguistic structures used overturn the true meaning of things, transforming what is familiar into something absurd and far from reality. The story has always been a source of interest, not only for kids and families, but for philosophers and thinkers as well. That's the reason why there are so many cinematographic transpositions for this novel, such as the anonymous movie by Tim Burton, released in 2010, that we're going to talk about later. Many Italian authors tried to translate Alice, but all of the puns, figures of speech, sayings, and references to English culture present in the book made the job very difficult. The novel is about Alice, a girl who dreams about chasing a white rabbit, and as she's following it, she falls into a rabbit hole, entering a magical world inhabited by bizarre creatures and mystical beings. As she's falling down the rabbit hole, after realizing that its walls are decorated with cups, shelves, paintings, and geographical maps hung with clothes pegs, Alice lands on twigs and dry leaves. Right in front of her, there's a long corridor that leads to a room with lots of chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. There are many doors in this room, and the girl tries to open them without success. All of a sudden, she notices a tiny door, through which she sees a beautiful garden. She really wants to go through that door, but she's way too big to fit. Magically, a three-legged table appears with a golden key and a bottle with "Drink Me" written on it. She drinks from it and suddenly shrinks, but once she gets to the door, she realizes she left the key on the table. She notices a pastry with eat meat written on it, and as she bites it, she becomes enormous. Now she can get the key, but she won't pass by the door again. She starts crying and the tears flood the room. Alice finally manages to become small again, gets through the door, and finds herself in Wonderland. The girl comes across many magical and mysterious creatures. The blue caterpillar, the Mad Hatter, and the March Hare who were having a tea party, the Cheshire Cat, until she gets to the Queen of Hearts castle. In the garden, there are card guards painting white roses red. Suddenly, the Queen's cortege comes. It's made of cards, and there are the spades, the gardeners, the diamonds, the nobility, the clubs, the guards, and the hearts, who represent the royal principles. The Queen, who represents fury, is immediately very aggressive towards anybody. She asks Alice to join her and play croquet, a very popular sport in England during the time the novel was written, but the field is constellated with holes in the ground. Instead of goalposts, there are cards and flamingos instead of sticks. The game is very messy, and the players shout and play all at the same time. The goalposts the cards, often have to go and guillotine whoever angers the queen. In the meanwhile, the court is gathered to judge the Jack of Hearts, accused of stealing some tarts. During the process, held by the White Rabbit, different species of animals are there as jurors, and the Mad Hatter, Duchess Cook, and Alice are there as witnesses. Everybody agrees that a signatureless letter that was found somewhere was the proof that the Jack of Hearts was guilty, but Alice doesn't agree. She started growing again, and as she stood up to testify, her skirt makes all the jurors fall. She got so big that she's not afraid of kings and queens anymore, and screams, "You're nothing but a deck of cards." Then she wakes up in her sister's arms, realizes it was all just a dream, and gets back home for tea time. Alice in Wonderland the movie can be considered a sequel to the book. Alice is now 19, and she doesn't remember her adventures in Wonderland, but she keeps dreaming about them, even 13 years apart. After the death of her beloved father, she attends a party, which turns out to be more than a simple feast. It's a trap. The young English Lord Hamish Ascot had invited hundreds of people so that he would have proposed to Alice in front of them. But Alice doesn't like him at all, and she doesn't want to marry him, so she runs away. As she's escaping, she notices a white rabbit running through the gardens, so she starts following it. The rabbit disappears into a hole in the ground. The girl gets very curious and decides to get close to the hole, and as she's looking into it to see what's inside, she trips and falls. Just like in the book, she falls into a room with a tiny door, so tiny that she can't fit through it. So she drinks from a mysterious bottle with a tag that says "Drink me." She shrinks and goes to the door, but notices that she forgot the key on the table. That's now too tall for her. So a slice of cake with "Imi" written on it appears, she eats it and gets tall again. As she finally gets through the door, she finds herself into a beautiful garden. In the distance she sees a white rabbit, a dodo, a dormouse, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. They were talking about her, and they were saying that she was the savior they have all been waiting for, but some of them weren't quite sure she was the right Alice. Since they weren't sure, they went to the blue caterpillar to consult the oraculum, a magical scroll that tells the history and the future of Wonderland. Each day has its own name and picture, and the fabulous day is when the final clash between the White Queen and the Red Queen happens. The White Queen wins when her champion, Alice, slays the Jabberwock, a dragon owned by the Red Queen. But the caterpillar is not sure that the Alice they got is the right Alice. In the meanwhile, the Red Queen's head of army enters the castle and gives her the oraculum he just stole. The Queen reads it, and when she gets to the day when Alice would have killed the Jabberwock, she gets infuriated and orders to find the girl and get her. Alice gets to the Queen's castle to free the Mad Hatter. She eats some magical cake and gets 2 meters tall. The Queen's guards find her, and the Queen is strangely intrigued by the girl, so she decides to let her stay in her castle for a while. Once Alice is in the castle, she gives the Bandersnatch, another Queen's monster, his eye back. He now trusts her, and she gets to steal the key the beast has on his neck. With that key, she can now open the trunk where the Vorpal Blade, the weapon she would have used to kill the Jabberwock with, is kept. Alice runs away on the back of the Bandersnatch to get to the White Queen's castle, with the Vorpal Blade and the Oraculum. There she really understands that she truly has to fight the Red Queen, her cards, and kill the Jabberwock to free Wonderland from tyranny. As they're getting ready for the battle, the caterpillar gets into his cocoon, right after admitting that Alice was, in fact, the right Alice, and promising her that they would have met again. The fabulous day finally comes, and the final battle takes place on a giant platform that looks just like a chessboard. On one side there's the White Queen, with her heroes and the Bandersnatch. On the other side there's the Red Queen, her army and the Jabberwock. Alice faces the Jabberwock and wins by killing the monster with the Vorpal blade. The Red Queen loses her crown, which means that now the White Queen is in control. The Nice Sister commands exile for the Wicked Sister. At the end of the battle, Alice decides to get back home to refuse Amish's wedding proposal. His father decides to hire the girl and bring her with him to explore the new trade routes to China. In the last scene, Alice is on board, ready to sail, when a blue butterfly gets on her shoulder. The girl recognizes that it's a blue caterpillar, and then the butterfly flies away.